I realized the folly of the service theme today, which is on climate change, and we've got all these great resources, and Mary wrote a new chapter in the song. Sometimes I wish that my eyes hadn't been opened, and that was all so great. But as I started to do the research and the thinking about climate change, I found myself getting totally overwhelmed. And there are some people in the congregation who are very knowledgeable about alternative forms of energy and power, and know that we need to do something radically different. And it was so complex, I found myself needing another cup of tea just to be able to listen to the complexity of it. And so I thought, what am I going to do? Because I want church to be relevant, and I want it to be dealing with that which are real issues. And clearly, climate change is one of the real issues. I heard a 16-year-old girl, Megami Saunders, had her 70th birthday party. You'll know her from First Met. And so I was pleased to be at it. And there was a 16-year-old girl who was reflecting what she felt life would be like when she was 70. And she did a few humorous things. And then she said, climate change. We're going to be much more into climate change 56 years from now. And she said, and that is going to be a total game changer in ways she can't even imagine. She said in 2050, the world population will be 9.8 billion people. And so I was working on this, and I know that many scientists think that Earth has a maximum carrying capacity of 9 to 10 billion people. So by 2050, we will have reached what scientists now believe is the maximum carrying capacity of the Earth. And I just thought, what's going to happen? What have we left for the generation of this 16-year-old girl and the generations that followed on this issue? And so I kind of wanted to mentally pull the blankets over my head and not pay attention to anything about climate change. And then I realized we do not have the luxury of despair or hopelessness. We have this situation that we're in, and if we just say it's too big for us to make any impact, then we will not do the small steps that we can do. So for the sake of future generations, we have to actually stand up and do what we can, both individually and collectively, to make whatever impact we can to reduce the draw on the world's resources. Now, I know that many of you folks already do that. You know, we have the thrift shop with its recycling, reusing, repairing, reducing. And we are a real force for good in the community. So that's one of the things I thought, you know what? We do that. And we put as little stuff into the landfill as is possible. Good on us. There are other things that we as individuals can do. Somebody was saying, you know, we should make our recycling program here at the church more effective and more visible so that people can participate and know where to put stuff. Another great idea. I was reading a book in preparation for this, and it's called Drawdown. And it's a collection of 100 of the best ideas that are happening throughout the world to draw down the carbon footprint. This person, Paul Hawken, he's a fellow who has been for years going around and interviewing these small projects that have a significant impact on drawing down the carbon footprint. And he kept saying to people, you know, somebody should collect all these projects that we get to hear about so that folks can have some hope and can see the progress that's being made. And who's collecting these? Is it the United Nations or some government, or who is it? And there was always he was met with a blank look. And then as he got more into it, he realized that everybody is so individualistic, they're doing their own thing, that nobody was collecting these ideas that came from across the world to help people make the reductions and the drawdowns that might be helpful, that will not at least increase the hurt and the harm. And so he took it on as a project. And you know what? It's a really, really interesting book of both complicated things and then some that are just so simple you think, wow, why didn't I think about that? And so it gave me hope. We have to make the decisions to do it. But the protection of the forests, like, we can do that through our public legislation. And yes, it's going to butt up against the increasing population. However, we're going to have to work out how we trade that off. So I recommend this book to you as a source of hope and a source of inspiration at the human spirits who are already working at this. So I guess if I had a 3-point sermon today, it would be that the first point is just to acknowledge that it's overwhelming, this question. But the second thing is to say, gird our loins, folks, because we don't have the luxury of despairing and living without hope. And living with hope is part of our spiritual path. It's part of our spiritual practice. So don't give up and don't turn away from the kind of challenge that there is. I know that in many cases it will be the young people who see that it's their future that is at stake, who will be doing things. And they will look to the adults like us. And what they need from us is for us to say, yes, experiment. Yes, try that. Yes, we are supportive of you taking on this issue of climate change. Lots of times we think to ourselves, I'm too tired to get into this, or it's too big an issue, or that kind of thing. There is a role for the wise elder in our society and in our lives, and it is the role of the wise elder to say yes to the creativity and to the inspiration and to the wild ideas that youth have, so that that's how advances happen. So we have a role. And the third point, I think, that I would make in this sermon is that I think we need to change the story that we as communities of faith tell about the earth. We had this story that the earth was created in 7 days. And in one of the stories, there's two of them actually, but in one of the stories, it was said that humans were given dominion over the land. And we took that to mean that somehow we were separate from this whole creation. That we were smarter, that we got to use the creation. Well, that story has created untold harm, and that story is now out of sync with what we know in the new science and what we know in the spiritual resources of our faith. We are not separate from the earth. We are created by stardust. We have in our bodies the same elements, the same carbon, the same water, the same basic essentials that create the various pieces of the world. We're made up of the same ingredients. We are one. This isn't about us having dominion and telling a story of us being in charge. The new story that we have got to start to tell ourselves and others and to live out is that we understand that our story and the spiritual story is one that we are all interconnected. One, the earth does not exist separate from us. It is impossible to have a healthy human being living on a sick earth. Thomas Berry is one of the people. I got to watch my time here because Thomas Berry is one of the people who says the universe story is the quintessence of reality. We perceive the story. We put it in our language. The birds put the story in their language, and the trees put it in theirs. We can read the story of the universe in the trees. Everything tells the story of the universe. The winds tell the story literally, not just imaginatively. The story has its imprint everywhere, and that's why it's so important to know the story. If you do not know the story, in a sense, you do not know yourself. You do not know anything. Thomas Berry said that engaging with the natural world and teaching children about it, but also for us as human beings to not be divorced from the human world, but to get out, to see the sunshine, to experience the cold, to feel ourselves at one with this home in which we live. That new understanding that there is no separation, and that if we have eyes to see, the trees will tell us their story. The water will tell their story. The animals will tell their stories. And we will add our story. So it's a story in which we give up our sense of domination and we move to a place of humility. It is a place where we see ourselves not over and above, but we see ourselves every bit as dependent on the universe story as any other ingredient is. When we make that mental shift, and I would say that that's a spiritual shift, a shift towards humility, a shift towards being willing to be one with the earth in which we walk, with the universe. When we have that changed spiritual perspective and are living in harmony, somehow, that's what we need to be about as a church, as a spiritual people. So I just wanted to offer that. It's not scientific, but that is, science is for the work of scientists. But the new story, the story of the universe, the spiritual story and understanding, that is the work for us. May it be so. Thanks for listening.